Good evening. It's good to be with you tonight. The last time that we were together, I read for you the 119th Psalm, and then for several weeks prior to that, I was reading through a book called Delighting in the Trinity, an Introduction to the Christian Faith. And so I've enjoyed this time away on Sunday nights, not the being away part, but I've at least enjoyed this chance to read through some books with you or Bible passages with you and talk about them. And in that line, I want to start another one tonight. And it is a book that I'm sure needs no introduction for most of you. It's The Pilgrim's Progress, written by John Bunyan, who was a preacher, but on top of that is what we would know as a bivocational preacher. He was a tinkersmith, which means that he, like his father before him, worked with tin or things that were made of tin. He repaired pots and pans, and so he was a man of humble birth and a man of humble vocation as well. But he was a mighty preacher of the word of the Lord. He was a separatist or a nonconformist is what they were called during that time, which means that he was not a part of the Church of England, and under King Charles it was illegal for him to preach apart from the Church of England or the Anglican Church. And so Bunyan spent time in prison because not only was he a separatist or nonconformist, he was a Baptist. And so he spent 12 years in prison because he wouldn't go by their rules, and then he got out for 3 years, and then after those 3 years was imprisoned again for a number of months. And it was during this second stint in prison that only lasted for several months that he wrote The Pilgrim's Progress. And I've heard the story that when he was in prison this second time, that the crowds of people loved his preaching so much that they would gather around the prison gate, if you will, and he would preach from inside the prison. And so that bothered the authorities, and they put him in solitary confinement to get him away from the people because such large crowds came. And it was there that he wrote this book through which he's ministered to countless multiplied times more people than he ever would have preached to outside of the prison walls. This was written in the mid 1670s, and it is what we would call an allegory. It is not a literal thing, but it's a way for him to communicate in characters and in images a vision for us or an idea for us that communicates what the Christian life is all about. And since the time that he wrote this book, it is the second best-selling English book in the history of books, and the first one would be the Bible. There's never been a time since when it was first published in the late 1670s that it's been out of print. And so what a fantastic book, what a fantastic gift this book has been to God's people, and what a fantastic gift John Bunyan was to his church and to the church even of our day. The copy that I'm going to be reading from, and let me see if you can see it. It is a beautiful copy. Can y'all see that? This was given to me this week by Bob Crawford, along with a number of other books in a set like it. Absolutely beautiful, covered in leather, wonderful illustrations in it. Just one of the best gifts I've ever received. So thank you, Bob, and I thank you for joining with me tonight. Now, let's begin to read The Pilgrim's Progress, and before I do so, I'm guessing you would understand that English in the 1670s doesn't sound exactly like English of the 2020s. So the language that you will hear here will sound very familiar to you if you've read from the King James Bible. If not, hang in there with me. You'll get the hang of it after a while. And I just trust that God's going to bless us through doing this, okay? It begins. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I lighted on a certain place where was a den, and I laid me down in that place to sleep. And as I slept, I dreamed a dream. I dreamed, and behold, I saw a man clothed with rags, standing in a certain place, with his face from his own house, a book in his hand, and a great burden upon his back. I looked and saw him open the book and read therein. And as he read, he wept and trembled. And not being able longer to contain, he brake out with a lamentable cry, saying, What shall I do? In this plight, therefore, he went home and refrained himself as long as he could, that his wife and children should not perceive his distress. But he could not be silent long, because that his trouble increased. Wherefore at length he brake his mind to his wife and children, and thus he began to talk to them. O my dear wife, said he, and you the children of my bowels, I, your dear friend, am in myself undone by reason of a burden that lieth hard upon me. Moreover, I am for certain informed that this our city will be burned with fire from heaven, in which fearful overthrow both myself, with thee my wife, and you my sweet babes, shall miserably come to ruin, except, the which yet I see not, some way of escape can be found, whereby we may be delivered. At this his relations were sore amazed, not for that they believed that what he had said to them was true, but because they thought that some frenzied distemper had got into his head. Therefore it drawing nigh towards night, and they hoping that sleep might settle his brains, with all haste they got him to bed. But the night was as troublesome to him as the day. Wherefore instead of sleeping, he spent it in sighs and tears. So when the morning was come, they would know how he did. He told them, worse and worse. He also set to talking to them again, but they began to be hardened. They also thought to drive away his distemper by harsh and surly carriages to him. Sometimes they would deride, sometimes they would chide, and sometimes they would quite neglect him. Wherefore he began to retire himself to his chamber, to pray for and pity them, and also to condole his own misery. He would also walk solitarily in the fields, sometimes reading and sometimes praying. And thus for some days he spent his time. Now I saw upon a time, when he was walking in the fields, that he was, as he was wont, reading in his book, and greatly distressed in his mind. And as he read, he burst out, as he had done before, crying, What shall I do to be saved? I also saw that he looked this way and that way, as if he would run. Yet he stood still, because as I perceived he could not tell which way to go. I looked then and saw a man named Evangelist coming to him, who asked, Wherefore dost thou cry? He answered, Sir, I perceive by the book in my hand that I am condemned to die, and after that to come to judgment. And I find that I am not willing to do the first, nor able to do the second. Christian no sooner leaves the world, but meets Evangelist, who lovingly him greets, with tidings of another, and does show him how to mount to that from this below. Then said Evangelist, Why not willing to die, since this life is attended with so many evils? The man answered, Because I fear that this burden that is upon my back will sink me lower than the grave, and I shall fall into Tophet. And sir, if I not be fit to go to prison, I am not fit, I am sure, to go to judgment, and from thence to execution. And the thoughts of these things make me cry. Then said Evangelist, If this be thy condition, why standest thou still? He answered, Because I know not whither to go. Then he gave him a parchment roll, and there was written within, Flee from the wrath to come. The man therefore read it, and looking upon Evangelist very carefully said, Whither must I fly? Then said Evangelist, pointing with his finger over a very wide field, Do you see yonder wicket gate? The man said, No. Then said the other, Do you see yonder shining light? He said, I think I do. Then said Evangelist, Keep that light in your eye, and go up directly thereto. So shalt thou see the gate, at which, when thou knockest, it shall be told thee what thou shalt do. So I saw in my dream that the man began to run. Now he had not run far from his own door, but his wife and children, perceiving it, began to cry after him to return. But the man put his fingers in his ears and ran on crying, Life, life, eternal life. So he looked not behind him, but fled towards the middle of the plain. The neighbors also came out to see him run. And as he ran, some mocked, others threatened, and some cried after him to return. And among those that did so, there were two that resolved to fetch him back by force. The name of the one was Obstinate, and the name of the other Pliable. Now by this time the man was got a good distance from them. But, however, they were resolved to pursue him, which they did, and in a little time they overtook him. Then said the man, Neighbors, wherefore are you come? They said, To persuade you to go back with us. But he said, That can by no means be. You dwell, said he, in the city of destruction, the place also where I was born. I see it to be so. And dying there, sooner or later, you will sink lower than the grave, into a place that burns with fire and brimstone. Be content, good neighbors, and go along with me. What? Said Obstinate, and leave our friends and our comforts behind us? Yes, said Christian, for that was his name, because that all which you shall forsake is not worthy to be compared with a little of that which I am seeking to enjoy. And if you will go along with me and hold it, you shall fare as I myself. For there, where I go, is enough and to spare. Come away and prove my words. What are the things you seek, since you leave all the world to find them? I seek an inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, and that fadeth not away. And it is laid up in heaven, and safe there to be bestowed at the time appointed on them that diligently seek it. Read it so, if you will, in my book. Tush, said Obstinate, away with your book. Will you go back with us or no? No, not I, said the other, because I have laid my hand to the plow. Come then, neighbor Pliable, let us turn again and go home without him. There is a company of these crazy-headed coxcombs that when they take a fancy by the end, are wiser in their own eyes than 7 men that can render a reason. Then said Pliable, Don't revile. If what the good Christian says is true, the things he looks after are better than ours. My heart inclines to go with my neighbor. What? More fools still. Be ruled by me and go back. Who knows whither such a brain-sick fellow will lead you? Go back, and be wise. Nay, but do thou come with thy neighbor Pliable? There are such things to be had which I spoke of, and many more glorious besides. If you believe not me, read here in this book. And for the truth of what is expressed therein, behold, all is confirmed by the blood of him that made it. Well, neighbor Obstinate, said Pliable, I begin to come to a point. I intend to go along with this good man and to cast in my lot with him. But my good companion, do you know the way to this desired place? Christian said, I am directed by a man whose name is Evangelist, to speed me to a little gate that is before us, where we shall receive instructions about the way. Come then, good neighbor, let us be going. Then they went both together. Obstinate said, And I will go back to my place. I will be no companion of such misled, fantastical fellows. Now I saw in my dream that when Obstinate was gone back, Christian and Pliable went talking over the plain, and thus they began their discourse. "Come, neighbor Pliable, how do you do? I am glad you are persuaded to go along with me. Had even Obstinate himself but felt what I have felt of the powers and terrors of what is yet unseen, he would not thus lightly have given us the back. Come, neighbor Christian, since there are none but two here, tell me now further what the things are and how to be enjoyed, whither we are going. I can better conceive of them with my mind than speak of them with my tongue, but yet, since you are desirous to know, I will read of them in my book." Pliable said, "And do you think that the words of your book are certainly true?" "Yes, verily, for it was made by him that cannot lie." "Well said. What things are they?" "There is an endless kingdom to be inhabited, an everlasting life to be given us, that we may inhabit that kingdom forever." Pliable said, "Well said. And what else?" "There are crowns and glory to be given us, and garments that will make us shine like the sun in the firmament of heaven." "This is very pleasant," said Pliable. "And what else?" "There shall be no more crying nor sorrow, for he that is the owner of the place will wipe away all tears from our eyes." Pliable said, "And what company shall we have there?" Christian answered, "There we shall be with seraphims and cherubims, creature that will dazzle your eyes to look on them. There also you shall meet with thousands and 10,000s that have gone before us to that place. None of them are hurtful, but loving and holy. Everyone walking in the sight of God and standing in his presence with acceptance forever. In a word, there we shall see the elders with their golden crowns. There we shall see the holy virgins with their golden harps. There we shall see men that by the world were cut in pieces, burnt in flames, eaten of beasts, drowned in the seas, for the love that they bear to the Lord of the place, all well, and clothed with immortality as with a garment." Pliable said, "The hearing of this is enough to ravish one's heart. But are these things to be enjoyed? How shall we get to be sharers thereof?" Christian answered, "The Lord, the governor of the country, hath recorded that in this book, the substance of which is, if we be truly willing to have it, he will bestow it upon us freely." Pliable said, "Well, my good companion, glad I am to hear of these things. Come on, let us mend our pace." Christian said, "I cannot go so fast as I would by reason of this burden that is on my back." Now I saw in my dream that just as they had ended this talk, they drew near to a very miry slough that was in the midst of the plain, and they, being heedless, did both fall suddenly into the bog. The name of the slough was Despond. Here therefore they wallowed for a time, being grievously bedaubed with the dirt. And Christian, because of the burden that was on his back, began to sink in the mire. Then said Pliable, "Ah, neighbor Christian, where are you now?" "Truly," said Christian, "I do not know." At this Pliable began to be offended and angrily said to his fellow, "Is this the happiness you have told me all this while of? If we have such ill speed at our first setting out, what may we expect betwixt this and our journey's end? May I get out again with my life, you shall possess the brave country alone for me." And with that, he gave a desperate struggle or two, and got out of the mire on that side of the slough which was next to his own house. So away he went, and Christian saw him no more. Wherefore Christian was left to tumble in the slough of despond alone. But still he endeavored to struggle to that side of the slough that was still further from his own house and next to the wicket gate, the which he did, but could not get out because of the burden that was upon his back. But I beheld in my dream that a man came to him, whose name was Help, and asked him what he did there. "Sir," said Christian,
I was bid go this way by a man called Evangelist, who directed me also to yonder gate, that I might escape the wrath to come. And as I was going thither, I fell in here. Help said, But why did you not look for the steps? Christian said, Fear followed me so hard that I fled the next way and fell in. Bug got on my page, had to get rid of it. Help said, Then said he, Give me thy hand. So he gave him his hand, and he drew him out, and set upon sound ground, and bid him go on his way. Then I stepped to him that plucked him out, and said, Sir, wherefore, since over this place is the way from the city of destruction to yonder gate, is it that this plat is not mended, that poor travelers might go thither with more security? And he said unto me, This miry slough is such a place as cannot be mended. It is the descent whither the scum and filth that attends conviction for sin doth continually run, and therefore it is called the Slough of Despond. For still as the sinner is awakened about his lost condition, there ariseth in his soul many fears and doubts and discouraging apprehensions, which all of them get together and settle in this place. And this is the reason of the badness of this ground. It is not the pleasure of the king that this place should remain so bad. His laborers also have, by the direction of his majesty's surveyors, been for above these 1600 years employed about this patch of ground, if perhaps it might have been mended. Yea, and to my knowledge, said he, here have been swallowed up at least 20,000 cartloads, yea, millions of wholesome instructions, that have at all seasons been brought from all places of the king's dominions, and that they can say, they are the best materials to make good ground of the place. If so be, it might have been mended, but it is the Slough of Despond still, and so will be when they have done what they can. True, there are, by the direction of the lawgiver, certain good and substantial steps placed even through the very midst of this slough. But at such time as this, place doth much spew out its filth, as it doth against change of weather, these steps are hardly seen. Or if they be, men, through the dizziness of their heads, step beside, and then they are bemired to purpose, notwithstanding the steps be there. But the ground is good when they are once got in at the gate. Now I saw in my dream that by this time Pliable was got home to his house again, so that his neighbors came to visit him. And some of them called him a wise man for coming back, and some called him fool for hazarding himself with Christian. Others again did mock at his cowardliness, saying, Surely, since you began to venture, I would not have been so base to have given out for a few difficulties. So Pliable sat sneaking among them. But at last he got more confidence, and then they all turned their tails and began to deride poor Christian behind his back. And thus much concerning Pliable. Now, as Christian was walking solitarily by himself, he espied one far off coming over the field to meet him. And their hap was to meet just as they were crossing the way of each other. The gentleman's name that met him was Mr. Worldly Wise Man. He dwelt in the town of Carnal Policy, a very great town, and also hard by from whence Christian came. This man then, meeting with Christian and having some inkling of him, for Christian's setting forth from the city of destruction was much noised abroad, not only in the town where he dwelt, but also it began to be the town talk in some other places. Mr. Worldly Wise Man, therefore, having some guess of him, by beholding his laborious going, by observing his sighs and groans and the like, began thus to enter into some talk with Christian. How now, good fellow, whither away after this burden manner? A burden manner indeed as ever, I think, poor creature had. And whereas you ask me, whither away? I tell you, sir, I am going to yonder wicket gate before me, for there, as I am informed, I shall be put into a way to be rid of my heavy burden. Mr. Worldly Wiseman, hast thou a wife and children? Christian answered, Yes, but I am so laden with this burden that I cannot take that pleasure in them as formerly. Methinks I am as if I had none. Wilt thou hearken unto me if I give thee counsel? If it be good, I will, for I stand in need of good counsel. I would advise thee then that thou with all speed get thyself rid of thy burden, for thou wilt never be settled in thy mind till then, nor canst thou enjoy the benefits of the blessing which God hath bestowed upon thee till then. That is that which I seek for, even to be rid of this heavy burden. But get it off myself I cannot, nor is there any man in our country that can take it off my shoulders. Therefore am I going this way, as I told you, that I may be rid of my burden. Who bid thee go this way to be rid of thy burden? A man that appeared to me to be a very great and honorable person. His name, as I remember, is Evangelist. I beshrew him for his counsel. There is not a more dangerous and troublesome way in the world than is that unto which he directed thee. And that thou shalt find, if thou wilt be ruled by his counsel. Thou hast met with something, as I perceive already, for I see the dirt of the slough of despond is upon thee. But that slough is the beginning of the sorrows that do attend those that go in that way. Hear me, I am older than thou. Thou art like to meet with in the way which thou goest wearisomeness, painfulness, hunger, perils, nakedness, sword, lions, dragons, darkness, and in a word, death, and what not. These things are certainly true, having been confirmed by many testimonies. And why should a man so carelessly cast away himself by giving heed to a stranger? Why, sir, this burden upon my back is more terrible to me than all these things which you have mentioned. Nay, methinks I care not what I meet with in the way, if so be I can also meet with deliverance from my burden. How camest thou by the burden at first? By reading this book in my hand. I thought so. And it has happened unto thee as to other weak men, who meddling with things too high for them do suddenly fall into thy distractions, which distractions do not only unman men, as thine, I perceive, have done thee, but they run them upon desperate ventures to obtain they know not what. I know what I would obtain. It is ease for my heavy burden. But why wilt thou seek for this ease, seeing so many burdens attend it? Especially since, hadst thou but patience to hear me, I could direct thee to the obtaining of what thou desirest, without the dangers thou in this way wilt run thyself into. Yea, and the remedy is at hand. Besides, I will add that instead of those dangers, thou shalt meet with much safety, friendship, and content. Pray, sir, open this secret to me. Why, in yonder village, the village is named Morality, there dwells a gentleman whose name is Legality, a very judicious man, and a man of very good name, that has skill to help me in off with such burdens as thine are from their shoulders. Yea, to my knowledge, he hath done a great deal of good this way. Aye, and besides, he hath skill to cure those that are somewhat crazed in their wits with their burdens. To him, as I said, thou mayest go and be helped presently. His house is not quite a mile from this place, and if he should not be at home himself, he hath a pretty young man to his son whose name is Civility, that can do it, to speak on, as well as the old gentleman himself. There, I say, thou mayest be eased of thy burden. And if thou art not minded to go back to thy former habitation, as indeed I would not wish thee, thou mayest send for thy wife and children thee to this village, where there are houses now stand empty, one of which thou mayest have at a reasonable rate. Provision is there, also cheap and good. and that which will make thy life the more happy is, to be sure, there shalt live by honest neighbors in credit and good fashion. Now was Christian somewhat at a stand, but presently he concluded, if this be true, with which this gentleman hath said, my wisest course is to take his advice, and with that he thus further spoke. Sir, which is my way to this honest man's house? Do you see yonder hill? Yes, very well. By that hill you must go, and the first house you come at is his. So Christian turned out of his way to go to Mr. Legality's house for help. But behold, when he was got now hard by the hill, it seemed so high, and also that side of it that was next the wayside did hang so much over, that Christian was afraid to venture further, lest the hill should fall on his head. Wherefore he stood still and wotted not what to do. Also his burden now seemed heavier to him than while he was in his way. There came also flashes of fire out of the hill, that made Christian afraid that he should be burned. Here therefore he sweat, and did quake for fear. When Christians unto carnal men give ear, out of their way they go and pay for it dear. For master worldly wise man can but show a saint the way to bondage and to woe. And now he began to be sorry that he had taken Mr. Worldly Wise Man's counsel. And with that he saw Evangelist coming to meet him, at the sight also of whom he began to blush for shame. So Evangelist drew near and near, and coming up to him, he looked upon him with a severe and dreadful countenance, and thus began to reason with Christian. What dost thou here, Christian? Said he. At which words Christians knew not what to answer. Wherefore at present he stood speechless before him. Then said Evangelist further, Art not thou the man that I found crying without the walls of the city of destruction? Yes, dear sir, I am the man. Did not I direct thee the way to the little wicket gate? Yes, dear sir, said Christian. How is it then that thou art so quickly turned aside? For thou art now out of the way. I met with a gentleman so soon as I had got over the slough of Despond, who persuaded me that I might in the village before me find a man that would take off my burden. What was he? He looked like a gentleman, and talked much to me, and got me at last to yield, so I came hither. But when I beheld this hill, and how it hangs over the way, I suddenly made a stand lest it should fall on my head. What said the gentleman to you? Why, he asked me whither I was going, and I told him. And what said he then? He asked me if I had a family, and I told him. But said I am so loaden with the burden that is on my back that I cannot take pleasure in them as formerly. And what said he then? He bid me with speed get rid of my burden, and I told him that it was ease that I sought. And said I am therefore going to yonder gate to receive further direction how I may get to the place of deliverance. So he said that he would show me a better way, in short, not so attended with difficulties as this way. Sir, that you have set me in. Which way, said he, will direct you to a gentleman's house that hath skill to take off these burdens. So I believed him, and turned out of that way into this, if haply I might soon be eased of my burden. But when I came to this place and beheld things as they are, I stopped for fear of danger, but I know not what to do. Then, said Evangelist, stand still a little, that I may show thee the words of God. So Christian stood trembling. Then said Evangelist, see that you refuse not him that speaketh. For if they escaped not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven. He said moreover, now the just shall live by faith. But if any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. He also did thus apply them. Thou art the man that art running into this misery. Thou hast begun to reject the counsel of the Most High, and to draw back thy foot from the way of peace, even almost to the hazarding of thy perdition. Then Christian fell at his feet as dead, crying, "Woe is me, for I am undone." At the sight of which Evangelist caught him by the right hand, saying, "All manner of sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men. Be not faithless, but believing." Then did Christian again a little revive, and stood up trembling, as at first before Evangelist. Then Evangelist proceeded, saying, "Give more earnest heed to the things that I shall tell thee of. I will now show thee who it was that deluded thee, and who it was also to whom he sent thee. The man that met thee is one worldly wise man, and rightly is he so called, partly because he savoreth only the doctrine of this world, therefore he always goes to the town of morality to church, and partly because he loveth that doctrine best, for it saveth him best from the cross. And because he is of this carnal temper, therefore he seeketh to pervert my ways through right. Now there are three things in this man's counsel that thou must utterly abhor. 1, his turning thee out of the way. 2, his laboring to render the cross odious to thee. And 3, his setting thy feet in that way which leadeth unto the administration of death. First, thou must abhor his turning thee out of the way, and thine own consenting thereunto, because this is to reject the counsel of God for the sake of the counsel of a worldly wise man. The Lord says, "Strive to enter in at the strait gate, the gate to which I sent thee. For strait is the gate that leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. From this little wicket gate, and from the way thereto, hath this wicked man turned thee, to the bringing of thee almost to destruction. Hate, therefore, his turning thee out of the way, and abhor thyself for hearkening to him. Secondly, thou must abhor his laboring to render the cross odious unto thee, for thou art to prefer it before the treasures of Egypt. Besides, the King of glory hath told thee that he that will save his life shall lose it. And he that cometh after me and hateth not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. I say therefore, for man to labor to persuade thee that shall be thy death, without which the truth has said, thou canst not have eternal life. This doctrine thou must abhor. Thirdly, thou must hate his setting of thy feet in the way that leadeth to the ministration of death. And for this thou must consider to whom he sent thee, also how unable that person was to deliver thee from thy burden. He to whom thou wast sent for ease, being by name Legality, is the son of the bondwoman which now is, and as is in bondage with her children, and is in a mystery this Mount Sinai, which thou hast feared will fall on thy head. Now, if she with her children are in bondage, how canst thou expect by them to be made free? This Legality, therefore, is not able to set thee free from thy burden. No man was as yet ever rid of his burden by him, no, nor ever is like to be. Ye cannot be justified by the works of the law. For by the deeds of the law no man living can be rid of his burden. Therefore Mr. Worldly Wise Man is an alien, and Mr. Legality is a cheat. And for his son Civility, notwithstanding his simpering looks, but a hypocrite and cannot help thee. Believe me, there is nothing in all this noise that thou hast heard of sottish men, but a design to beguile thee of thy salvation by turning thee from the way in which I had set thee. After this, Evangelist called aloud to the heavens for confirmation of what he had said. And with that there came words and fire out of the mountain under which poor Christian stood, that made the hair of his flesh stand up. The words were thus pronounced: As many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. Now Christian looked for nothing but death, and began to cry lamentably, even cursing the time in which he met with Mr. Worldly Wise Man, still calling himself 1,000 fools for hearkening to his counsel. He also was greatly ashamed to think that this gentleman's arguments, flowing only from the flesh, should have the prevalency with him as to cause him to forsake the right way. This done, he applied himself again to evangelist in words and sense as follow. Christian said, Sir, what think you? Is there hope? May I now go back and go up to the wicket gate? Shall I not be abandoned for this and sent back from thence ashamed? I am sorry I have hearkened to this man's counsel, but may my sin be forgiven? Then said evangelist to him, Thy sin is very great, for by it thou hast committed two evils. Thou hast forsaken the way that is good to tread in forbidden paths. Yet will the man at the gate receive thee, for he has a good will for men. Only said he, Take heed that thou turn not aside again, lest thou perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Then did Christian address himself to go back, and evangelist, after he had kissed him, gave him one smile and bid him Godspeed. So he went on with haste. Neither spake he to any man by the way, nor if any asked him, would he vouchsafe them an answer. He went like one that was all the while treading on forbidden ground, and could by no means think himself safe, till again he was got into the way which he left, to follow Mr. Worldly Wise Man's counsel. So in the process of time, Christian got up to the gate. Now over the gate there was written, Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. He that will enter in first must first without stand knocking at the gate, nor need he doubt. That is a knocker, but to enter in, for God can love him and forgive his sin. He knocked therefore and more than once or twice, saying, May I now enter here? Will he within open to sorrow me, though I have been an undeserving rebel? Then shall I not fail to sing his lasting praise on high. At last there came a grave person to the gate named Goodwill, who asked who was there, and whence he came, and what he would have. And we'll pick up there next time.